In just 4 months, a single city blew through its entire yearly budget for police misconduct by nearly $100 million.
Yeah, and keep in mind, we're only talking about the first third of the year.
Yeah.
I mean, the sheer scale of that miscalculation is just, it's hard to wrap your head around.
Right. Well, welcome to the deep dive. Today we're looking at a stack of news reports, city agendas, and economic case studies, all centered on one pretty wild day in Chicago.
April 15th, 2026, to be exact.
Exactly. So I want to give you, the listener, a quick 90-second rundown of the shockwaves from this single city council session. First off, the council failed to override Mayor Brandon Johnson's veto. That locks in a law guaranteeing higher minimum wages for restaurant workers.
Right, the One Fair Wage Ordinance.
Yeah. Second, officials revealed that explosive $175.6 million spent on police settlements in just 120 days. And third, they threw a desperate lifeline to taxi drivers, handing them their first fare hike in a full decade.
It is just a massive lineup for one single day. You know, we are looking at a city actively scrambling to balance economic fairness with public safety, all while staring down a really brutal budget crisis.
And our mission today is to break down the actual mechanics of these decisions. We want you to understand exactly where your tax dollars are going, how these policies reshape the local economy, and what happens when a local government is forced to just constantly play catch-up.
Yeah, and the numbers here are just wild.
They really are. So let's start with that budget hemorrhage. Chicago officials only set aside $82.5 million to cover police misconduct lawsuits for all of 2026.
Which, I mean, that sounds like a lot of money, until you realize they spent $175.6 million by April just to resolve about 200 cases.
Wow.
Yeah. They overshot their annual budget by over $90 million before summer even started. So to keep the lights on and cover these soaring legal costs, the city had to authorize borrowing another $283.3 million.
Okay, wait, I have to stop you there because this is where the mechanics really confuse me.
Yep.
If a private business, say, a tech startup or a restaurant group, blows past its legal budget by nearly $100 million in a single quarter, the doors get locked.
Oh, yeah, they go bankrupt immediately.
Right. So how does a city actually absorb a financial blow this massive without slashing the basic services you and I rely on every day?
Well, the short answer is they don't absorb it. They defer it.
Meaning what exactly?
I mean, a city does not operate like a traditional business. When a municipality runs out of cash to pay for something like a massive legal settlement, they issue bonds.
Okay.
Basically, they are borrowing money from investors today and using the city's future tax revenue as collateral. And they pay those investors back with interest over time.
So they are essentially taking out a massive mortgage just to pay for past mistakes.
Exactly. And that is the crucial mechanism to understand here. We are seeing the long tail effect of historical bad actions. Like these payouts in 2026 are primarily for events that happened years, sometimes decades ago.
Right, the bills are finally coming due.
Yeah. When the city borrows hundreds of millions of dollars to pay off these historical bills, they are forcing future generations of taxpayers to foot the bill. The interest on that borrowed money eats directly into the budget for things we need today. You know, street paving, garbage collection, even better police training.
Which is a huge burden on the taxpayers.
Right.
Let's look at the actual cases draining this budget, because wrongful convictions are the biggest factor here. For example, the city unanimously approved a $9.5 million settlement for a man named Carl Reed.
Yes.
He spent 19 years in prison after a wrongful murder conviction.
And the details of the Reed case are just grim.
Yeah.
A former detective named Richard Zulli denied Reed his required medication for 55 hours just to force a fabricated confession.
That is terrifying.
It is a horrifying violation of civil rights, and the financial fallout is immense.
And the financial hit to the taxpayer doesn't even stop at the settlement. You and I also paid $483,200 just to hire outside lawyers to defend the officers who sent Reed to prison in the first place.
Right. That defense cost is a major hidden drain on the system. And Reed's case is just one piece of the puzzle. Earlier in January, the city paid $35 million to partially settle a massive cluster of lawsuits involving 180 different Chicagoans.
Ah, the Ronald Watts cases.
Yes. Former Sergeant Ronald Watts and his tactical team systematically planted fabricated evidence on people in public housing.
Wow.
Those 180 people spent a combined 200 years in prison. And the city is expecting to pay another $45 million before the end of the year just to finally close the books on the rest of those specific lawsuits.
It's just staggering. Add to that the $40.6 million the city spent just on botched police pursuits.
Yeah, high-speed chases that went wrong and caused injuries or property damage.
Right. We're also seeing the tension around reform playing out in real time, like an ordinance designed to ban officers from joining extremist groups, specifically naming the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers, was delayed at this meeting.
Yeah, 2 aldermen actually blocked the vote.
Why block it?
Well, to keep it from getting buried in committee. They're hoping to get a cleaner vote on it in May. It really highlights the ongoing, grinding struggle to change the culture while, paying for the sins of the past.
And the connective tissue here seems to be pressure.
Absolutely. The city is drowning in debt from these lawsuits, which means they have very little financial breathing room to help the local economy.
Right. They can't afford to lower taxes or subsidize struggling industries.
Exactly. They have to pass the burden down to the taxpayer and local businesses.
Which brings us right to the micro-level struggles of local businesses and everyday workers. Because at that same April 15 meeting, they had a massive showdown over the tipped minimum wage.
Yeah, the city council tried to override Mayor Brandon Johnson's veto.
And the vote came down 30-19 in favor of the override. But legally, they needed 34 votes to win.
Right, so because they fell short, the override failed. And a law known as the One Fair Wage Ordinance remains fully active.
This is a massive shift for the service industry, right?
Oh, huge. It means the subminimum wage for tipped workers, which was sitting at $12.62 an hour, is going to automatically increase every single year.
Until it hits what?
Until it matches the standard city minimum wage of $16.60 by 2028.
Now, the sources we are looking at lay out incredibly fierce arguments from both sides of this debate. And to be clear, we are just looking at the arguments they present.
Right.
On the pro-wage side, supporters point out the basic math of survival. Workers desperately need this higher guaranteed base pay just to afford rent and groceries in a major city.
Yeah, and relying heavily on tips leaves workers highly vulnerable to a practice called tip skimming.
Which is wage theft, basically.
Exactly. Tip skimming is a pervasive form of wage theft. It happens when managers or owners illegally take a percentage of the tip pool before it ever reaches the server's paychecks.
Wow. So if your base wage is a guaranteed $16 an hour, you are far less vulnerable to that kind of quiet theft.
Right. Supporters also point to the human cost of the tipping system. Studies show that tip amounts often fluctuate based on race, gender, or appearance.
Rather than the actual quality of service.
Exactly. And from a safety perspective, guaranteeing a full wage helps protect workers from sexual harassment.
That makes sense. During the pandemic, we saw countless stories of servers feeling forced to tolerate abusive customers simply because they needed the tip money to survive the week.
Yeah. There is also a deep historical context here. The concept of a subminimum tipped wage has its roots in the post-Civil War era.
Really?
Yeah, it was originally championed by the hospitality industry as a way to avoid paying a fair standard wage to newly freed enslaved people who were entering the workforce. So supporters argue abolishing it is correcting a historical inequity.
Okay, but the anti-wage argument is also incredibly urgent, especially for the local economy. The Illinois Restaurant Association has been sounding the alarm.
Yeah, they are warning that independent neighborhood restaurants operate on razor-thin margins.
Right, we aren't talking about massive corporate chains here. We are talking about family-owned spots.
Exactly. To survive these sudden government-mandated spikes in labor costs, restaurant owners say they only have a few terrible options.
Which are?
They either raise menu prices dramatically, cut staff hours to bare minimums, or just close their doors forever. And this introduces a fascinating economic concept known as the border ward fear.
Wait, explain how a border ward actually works in this scenario.
So a border ward is a city district located right on the geographic edge of Chicago.
Okay.
If you own a restaurant in one of these wards, your competition might literally be across the street, but technically in a different suburb.
Oh, I see.
And in those suburbs, the labor laws are less restrictive, the minimum wage is lower, and therefore the cost of running the business is lower.
So the fear is that customers will simply drive 5 extra minutes across the city line to get a burger that doesn't cost an arm and a leg.
Exactly, causing businesses inside the Chicago border to just collapse.
I am hung up on the consumer psychology of this, though. Wait, if the price of my burger jumps by $5 to cover these new wages, won't customers just stop tipping altogether? Does this actually put more money in a server's pocket at the end of the night?
Well, that is the exact fear many veteran tipped workers have.
Really?
Yeah. Some servers actually actively oppose this law because they make excellent money at high-end restaurants under the current system. They're terrified of losing their tip volume.
Right.
But when we look at the data from places that have already implemented similar laws, the reality is complex. Take Washington, D.C., for example.
Okay, what happened to the tips there when they passed a similar law?
Studies from D.C. show that tipping behavior often remains surprisingly consistent even when the base wages go up.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Tipping in America is a deeply ingrained cultural habit. People tend to leave 18 or 20% on the machine out of muscle memory, regardless of the underlying wage laws.
Okay, so the workers do end up making more in those specific scenarios.
Often, yes. But we absolutely cannot ignore the broader economic fallout. The fear of neighborhood restaurants closing down is not just a talking point. It is a painful, documented growing pain of this kind of economic shift.
You're right.
When a government mandate suddenly spikes labor costs, businesses that were barely scraping by do fail. It is a harsh reality of market intervention.
It is a brutal situation for a small business owner who suddenly feels like the government changed the math on their livelihood overnight.
Yeah.
But restaurant workers are not the only ones fighting for survival in a changing economy. A legacy workforce on the streets of Chicago is finally getting a long overdue lifeline.
Right, the taxi industry.
Exactly. At this same meeting, the city council approved the first taxi fare hike in a decade.
It's been a long time coming.
Yeah. They are increasing base fares by about 20%, plus adding a $2.50 rush hour surcharge and a $1 overnight fee.
Which is a desperate, overdue attempt to stabilize an industry that was essentially flattened by uneven regulation and the rise of the gig economy.
The numbers behind the collapse of the taxi industry are just staggering. Before 2012, if you wanted to operate a cab in Chicago, you needed an official license called a medallion.
Right.
The city strictly limited the number of medallions, which created artificial scarcity. Because of that, a single medallion was worth over $350,000.
Wow. For a cab driver, that medallion was their entire life savings. It was their retirement plan.
Right. Then in 2012 and 2013, tech companies like Uber and Lyft flooded the market.
Operating outside the medallion system entirely.
Exactly. The city allowed them to flood the streets with unlimited cars, completely bypassing the scarcity model that gave the medallions their value in the first place.
And today, that same piece of metal that was once worth $350,000 has plummeted to a value of just $6,000.
It feels like taxi drivers are forced to play a board game where their rules haven't changed since 2016. They are locked into strict pricing and heavy regulations. Meanwhile, the rideshare apps get to sit at the same table and invent new rules like surge pricing whenever they want.
That is a perfect way to visualize it. And it perfectly illustrates the city's broader struggle. The government tightly controlled the taxi industry for decades.
Right.
Then, free market tech companies arrived and moved way too fast for the city to react. Whether the council is trying to regulate gig economy apps or forcing changes to restaurant wages, local government is constantly playing catch-up.
Trying to protect traditional workers from being crushed by rapid economic and technological shifts.
Exactly.
And we are seeing the city government rearrange its own players to try and tackle these exact economic problems. The council confirmed several major leadership shakeups at this meeting.
Oh, yeah. Alderman Gil Villegas is taking over the zoning committee.
Right.
Alderman Derek Curtis is stepping up to lead economic development. And Kenya Merritt was confirmed to head cultural affairs.
So they are shuffling the deck, trying to build a defensive line capable of handling a city economy that is under extreme stress.
Yeah, they're trying to find the right personnel to manage a sprawling, complicated machine that is currently running a massive deficit.
We have covered a tremendous amount of ground today. We started with a police budget bleeding hundreds of millions of dollars, moved into a fierce battle over the future of restaurant wages, and looked at an old-school taxi industry gasping for air.
It's a lot.
So let's bring it all back to you, the listener. Why should you care about a random city council meeting on a Tuesday in April?
Because every single topic we discussed today reaches directly into your wallet.
Exactly. When the city borrows $283 million to pay for lawsuits caused by decades of police misconduct, your future taxes are the collateral securing that debt.
Right.
When the city mandates that independent restaurants increase their base wages by several dollars an hour, the price of the pizza you order on a Friday night climbs to cover that gap.
Yeah, and when the council tries to save a dying industry by changing transportation rules, the cost of your cab ride home goes up.
These aren't abstract debates happening in a vacuum. They are the actual levers that dictate the cost of living in your city.
It highlights the ultimate challenge of local government. They're constantly trying to balance the scales of fairness and safety, but they're often left managing the unintended consequences of their own rules.
Which brings us to our final thought for the day. We started this deep dive talking about a city that blew through its legal budget in just 4 months, forcing them to borrow against the future.
Yeah.
So I want to leave you with this brand new thought to ponder. If cities are forced to borrow hundreds of millions of dollars just to pay for the mistakes of their past, what critical investments for the future, like new schools, better transit, or affordable housing, are being quietly erased before they can even be proposed?
It's a heavy question.
Think about that the next time you look at your tax bill. Thanks for diving deep with us today.